What's going on, listeners? Anthony Grasso, your host here. In this episode today, we have Steve Georgio, who is an assistant strength and conditioning coach at Fordham University in New York. Steve is a friend of mine. I've been around him since 2017. I met him at Quinnipiac through a mutual friend, and we've kept in touch ever since and had a ton of dialogue, whether it be about training or other aspects of life. And just been a good dude overall to know. So what I do think is important is obviously he touches on a variety of different ways to kind of meet athletes where they are in this particular podcast. So, whether it be through nutrition or whether it be through training or other concepts that you're trying to employ with the athlete, he really dives deep into some ways to kind of meet them halfway. We get into talking about a lot of the resources and a lot of things that have kind of shaped the way he views things and some of his mindset as well. In addition to his journey through Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is something we talk about on the back end of this podcast, and some of the concepts and principles that he's been able to take from Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and apply to his career as a coach, but not only as a coach, but as a friend, as a son, and as a man as well. So it's a great podcast. He brings a ton of good wisdom, and obviously just to give you an example of his overall thoughts in general, I think you guys will really appreciate. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective podcast. Today, we are joined by Steve Georgio, who's assistant strength and conditioning coach at Fordham University. I am your host, Anthony Grasso, and we are super pumped to have him here today. An absolute legend, an absolute mammoth of a man here. We got a bachelor's from Springfield in movement studies, a little master's from Merrimack in exercise and sports studies. The places he's been: Citadel, Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, Iona College, Springfield College, as I mentioned. He holds certifications as a CSCS, a Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and he also holds certifications from United States Weightlifting, as well as Level 1 Precision Nutrition and the FRC Movement Specialist that he is. Steve, welcome, bro. I'm really pumped to have you on here. I appreciate you doing this on such short notice as well. We'll get into obviously your weekend as well. I kind of want to get some feedback on that and get a little insight on what's going on there, a little BJJ action. I need some coaching myself, so we'll definitely get a little bit of that in there. But first, I just wanted to obviously give you a chance to kind of tell your story. Obviously, I've mentioned some of the places you've been. I've talked about some of the certifications, but they obviously don't tell the whole story. So where did this whole thing start for you, man? And what are you doing now? Kind of like, I know, like, obviously when I went through your profile and everything, it's like you held many different you wore many different hats and held many different titles at a lot of the places that you've been. You did, a variety of things, right? So, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of dive into that and let people know about like what you've done, obviously at the places you've been and with the value that you brought.
Yeah. I mean, I'll definitely say, it all started at Springfield College. Just kind of wound up there on a whim. And it was definitely the perfect place to be. I mean, for those that don't know about Springfield College or those that do know, it is Strength Coach U. It is everybody, caring about and always thinking about some type of strength training or nutrition or wellness or something like that. Everybody holds a major, sorry if it's a little crazy with the outside noises out here.
No, you're good.
Everybody holds a major in some type of nutrition or strength and conditioning or exercise science or, PE or something like that. So it was really a good place to be in the terms of, everybody is a like-minded individual and there's always something that you could do at any given time, day or whatever to just better yourself. So Springfield College is really a special place to be. And, I apologize if I sound like a broken record because everybody says that. So did my time at Springfield. From there, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school just to kind of, open up different doors in terms of jobs later on. So I decided to go to Merrimack. It was a brand new program, just kind of getting the feet off the ground. I was actually in the second year of the program. So before I started up there, I figured I'd get a little bit of experience, did my internship at the Citadel. And then actually while I was at Merrimack, did some time at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, started with a fellowship and then wound up being hired at the end of the fellowship over there. And then from the culmination of that, I mean, the rest is kind of history, just kind of got out, knew what I wanted to do, sent my resume to pretty much every school that I could think of where I'm from in Westchester, New York. Iona was one of the places that, called back and had a internship opportunity. So I started there, and that was under Coach Kelly Shaver, a great friend, a great mentor, just a great all-around person. Started at Iona College, worked there for a little over a year, and then tried the whole private sector thing, just to give it a fair opportunity, and just kind of it was a good chance to take, and especially in my current situation. So I tried it, hated the private sector, do not want to go back right now. Obviously, anything is possible, and I don't want to say never. But then found my way back to Fordham University for an internship, which wound up just right place, right time, led into a job, and then been here ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So when you go, just to go back to the Springfield thing, I know you mentioned it. You're like, oh, well, for those of you who don't know or may not have heard, like, obviously everybody has heard of strength. Like if you work in strength and conditioning, you've heard of Springfield College, right? And you even admitted yourself, right? It's kind of like a broken record. But what did you think heading into a place like that when obviously there's going to be a myriad of people who obviously specialize in all the different areas and interests that you can be involved in the world of physical preparation. Like there's got to be some concern, like, well, how am I going to make an impact here? Like, where am I going to kind of like stake my claim and like actually create some sort of value here, right? I kind of felt that way, like when I've gone to some like the bigger universities I've interned at, right? Like it's like, okay, like what can I do to kind of make my step? Were there nerves there, or was it like, hey, listen, if this is what I want to do, I'm going to seek out the best, and obviously these guys it's a factory here for strength and conditioning coaches, so I'm just going to go there and just give it everything I got?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if I left a legacy or not. Maybe not, who knows. But kind of with that being said, I just basically how I approached everything else, and I'm sure it's almost like any collegiate athlete, when they first get on the team, in the sense that, like, when they were in high school, they were probably the person, and they were the best in their high school, in their region, or whatever, and then they get to college and they realize that, well, everybody is kind of was their person, or the top tier on their team, or whatever it is. So it's probably the same at Springfield, in the sense that, like, you get there and, man, everybody could deadlift 500 pounds, and everybody could bench press this much, and everybody looks like this, and you know about this micronutrient, well, they know about it too, type thing. So I would just say, I just tried to get better every single day. I tried to learn from everybody, and I'd probably say a reoccurring theme is just try out everything, whether that be different clubs or, weekend activities or extracurriculars or whatever it is. And one of those was actually called Team Iron Sports, which was a club team, but we still got to lift in the varsity weight room, and we lifted 2 or 3 times every single week. And then we competed on the weekends. And that was just one of the things that kind of definitely helped to stand out amongst everybody else, was joining a team like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the professors there obviously kind of encourage you guys and push you along that path. I would assume that there's probably a little bit more in a place like that. It's probably a little bit more of like hey, you're going to get out of this what you put in kind of thing. Like like you said, everybody's kind of showing up assuming, all right, well, this is what I want to pursue. I have these skills, I have these abilities, right? And then at some point, though, like you said, in order to have that impact, you probably need to be pretty aggressive and proactive in seeking out the information from all the professors and the coaches and the other people who are involved in the program with you. Would you say you were pretty aggressive and proactive on that end, where it's like, I'm going to try and literally soak up as much information as I possibly can, shake as many hands as I can, while I'm here?
Yeah, I would probably say, and unfortunately, I probably have many regrets. And one of the regrets would be earlier on in college, maybe not as aggressive as I should have been. But then
it's tough to know then,
100%. And then I'm thankful that I definitely had a wake up call, my junior year. And it just came from, not getting into the major that I really wanted to get into, and, having to go into a major that was potentially viewed as a little bit lower, which was a wake up call. And then from there on, it's like, all right, I'm going to, participate as best as I can. I'm not just going to be all right with, giving a presentation that was just as good as the last one or something like that. Like, I want to be a little bit better. I want to put in a lot of time into the research that I'm doing, the schoolwork that I'm doing. And then, like you said, just shake as many hands as possible.
Yeah. What would you say, like kind of moving off of that, obviously you had some experience at Iona that I wanted to get into, because obviously, and I want you to talk about obviously, what's going on now at Fordham, because you're not just one of these strength coaches who, okay, I'm just, a football strength coach. I've been a football strength coach for 8 years, right? Like, you obviously have had a ton of experience with a variety of sports, variety of different athletes, a variety of different hats that you've needed to wear, like I alluded to in the earlier part of the podcast, right? So what was Iona like? I mean, you seem to be, you were working with at least 4 or 5 different teams at that time. And I also read that you actually had some experience experience and some handling of the nutrition side of things, or some collaborative, cohesive work going on with the nutrition staff and some of the other people. So like, how did that experience kind of shift? Because I remember that was about the time that you and I discussed, all right, like, private sector, pursuing other opportunities kind of thing, like where, I think everybody at some point in everybody's strength and conditioning career, there's a little bit of like a stagnation where you're like, where is this going? Like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Talk to me a little bit about that Iona experience and that kind of shaped what's going on now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was right place, right time, in the sense that just coming from Mike Boyle's strength and conditioning, one of the first internships and kind of my first work experience, like you basically will take whatever they give you and you want more. So they give you 10-year-old athlete group. All right, I want it. All right, we have an opening for an adult group. All right, I want to work that too. We have collegiate athletes. We have a NFL combine group, and you just want to work everything. So that kind of translated into Iona, where it's like some people maybe later on in the career might be like, all right, maybe I don't want to have, 5, 6 teams, whatever it is. Maybe I just want to have one and just focus on these 12 guys, girls, whatever. I was so eager that I was just like, all right, give me whatever team. I want to work with all these teams. And I'm excited to, program for a bunch of different teams, change up the program as much as possible, and, make as many variations of that program based on different needs and things of that nature. So looking back, was it tough? Yeah, 100%. But the fact that it was my first job, I'm eager to take on as many teams and as much responsibility as possible. And then, like you said, anything that we want to do outside of there, it can't just be like, all right, you're the nutrition guy and you're the social media guy. Everybody just kind of has to have a hand in everything. And I was lucky to work, obviously, like I said, under Coach Kelly Shaver, and then also alongside Coach Dom Sauduti, who's actually the head strength coach at LIU now. But having those people, and we all kind of shared responsibilities with all the things that we would do outside, because we knew how important nutrition was, and social media, was pretty much getting to its peak, if not at its peak at that point. So, we need to be on social media. We need to give nutrition advice. We need to give sleep advice. And it was just such a good staff that we all kind of culminated and created some really cool things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And kind of like, building off of that, before we get into what's going on with you now at Fordham and some of the things that you're really passionate about implementing with your athletes, the fact that you've worked at so many different sports, right? There's going to be, give and take with that, right? There's going to be athletes at times that are like, obviously you didn't play every sport out there that you've worked with, right? Like there's going to be some sports that you worked with or you didn't. And even the sports that you did work with, like you're going to have athletes who are going to have to, you're going to have to do a little bit more to create some of that trust and create some of that buy-in. So what are some of the things that you've learned? Maybe this has changed over the years, but like, what are some of the things that you've learned as far as trying to develop buy-in and create some trust within yourself and the athletes? I would imagine it's changed, or maybe you got it right off the bat, you know what I mean? But like, it could be a personality thing or characteristic thing, but what are some of those things that you focus on when trying to establish that?
Yeah, I definitely didn't get it right off the bat. And
most people don't.
I would say like earlier on, I was probably subscribed to the mindset of like, all right, the swim team needs a swim program and the baseball team needs a baseball program, and they need to be completely different. And that's exactly what I did at Iona. And you kind of explain, hey, I'm putting this in the program, and this is why. This is specific to your sport, your movement, or whatever it is. And then it's funny, you kind of learn more, and you think that the answer is more, being more complex, but it's actually being a lot more simpler. And you realize that, all right, nowadays my programs probably look a lot more similar than they did, 3-4 years ago. And nowadays it's, all right, let's get really, really, really good at these simple, basic movements. And across the board, every team needs this for the most part. We're going to do some type of Olympic variation if we can, if it's the right time. We're going to squat. We're going to do chin-ups. We're going to bench press. We're going to row, maybe some type of pull variation, hamstring, stuff like that. Like, I would say as the years went on, I got a lot more simpler and just dumbed things down a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? Like at some point you think, all right, this is going to be a lot more complex than it needs to be, right? You're like, I need to create buy-in with these athletes. I got to try to figure out a way to get them bought into the complexity of all the things that you are aware of. Obviously, of course, you're capable of going down that road, but I think at the end of the day, there's so much value, and I feel like they feel like there's so much value in just keeping things a little bit more simple, having them be able to create connectivity between what they're doing and some other athletes and what they're doing in their programs as well. So, and I see it all over your social media now. I think, like you said, like you mentioned social media, obviously you need to be active and proactive in that sense. So talk to us a little bit about what's going on at Fordham now. You obviously have established yourself, like you are there. You like, which teams are you involved in? And then let's kind of dive deep into a little bit of the weeds of like what, some of the things that you're truly passionate about that you found that you're kind of trying to implement with some of the teams that you're working with now.
Yeah, really good question. So, being that it's about to be my third year at Fordham, I think for the most part, like year one was basically just, all right, let me get to know the athletes. Let the athletes get to know me, and we'll kind of have this onboarding process for the most part, and we'll see if it's a good fit. Year two, all right, now we kind of know each other. We have a relationship set in stone. All right, now I could start to kind of implement some of my philosophies, some of the things that I believe in, and where I see the program going. And then nowadays it's all right. This is my program. This is my style of programming. Let's start to fine tune this and make this really, really good. And I only see that getting more specific as the years go on. Currently, I work with the men's basketball team as my main responsibility. I work with volleyball, men's soccer, men's tennis, women's tennis, and then I assist with the football team. And I would just say the big thing. Yeah, if you think about it like that, it definitely is. But it keeps you busy, number one. Number two, it allows you to kind of switch back and forth and maybe not get too specific with one sport or one team. And it keeps me versatile, which is good. So, I remember back from my time at Boyles, it's like, I don't want to say anybody could, teach one team or one person or something like that, but it's like the true make of a good coach is like, all right, can you teach a large group of 10-year-olds that don't have a big attention span, how to squat or how to do push-ups or how to do a superset or something like that. So it's good because you get to teach a variety of different people, the same things or different things, and you really become a better coach that way. And to kind of go back to your question, really the biggest thing would just be, all right, maybe I started with a little bit simpler variations, and nowadays pretty much all my teams are doing some form of Olympic weightlifting, really trying to fine tune form. It's going to take a while. It's still not perfect or where we want it to be, but it's definitely getting there. And then just, the big rocks, whether that be bench press for certain teams, whether that be, back or front squat for certain teams, just trying to make sure that I perfect everything and we get really, really good at the basics.
Yeah, no, it's a good place to be. And I think you're right. You make a solid point that, like, kind of like what we go back to before, that is the versatility that you can provide for yourself, and then obviously the other teams involved. I think it's almost like one of those things where it was like the more skills you have, the more skills you can acquire, right? So it's like, and I feel like that was always kind of like a rule of thumb when you talk about any sort of like movement skill acquisition. And I almost wonder if that probably applies to any coach as well. Like the more teams you work with, the more teams that you'll be able to work with down the road. So I think that's pretty cool. And now you said the main responsibility that you have is going to be men's basketball. So I guess we could kind of start there. And you could kind of span, the court, because obviously I see most of the, different athletes and most of the teams that you work with. So is there anything in particular over the past 2 to 3 years since you've been at Fordham, or maybe even prior, that you feel, your mindset is kind of directed towards? Maybe it's one or two different aspects of, physical prep. Maybe it's something that has to do with nutrition, whatever it is. I know, kind of when we spoke a couple of years ago during COVID, when we had the quarantine or whatever, there's a couple of things you were on, and it's like, what are some of those things, and for you, and kind of how are you, deciding you want to implement those things with some of the teams that you're working with now?
Yeah, two things I would say 100%, and I would agree with these wholeheartedly, and I don't see these changing too much as the years go on, but is nutrition and consistency. I mean, the more that I can read about other things or learn about different techniques or whatever it is, it all comes back to nutrition and just consistency with everything. So that's nutrition, that's, lifestyle habits, that's sleep, that's training, whatever it is. And I think, I'm cool with just keeping it right there and just really focusing on those things, because I've seen some really, really impressive changes and growth and strength increases just based on, nutrition alone. I've seen some really, really great things happen in the weight room and on the field just from being a whole lot consistent. And, I think it definitely keeps me busy, because it's one of those things where it's not easy at first, and the athlete might not buy into it right off the bat. But if we just keep pushing, and then, I probably learned this a lot from precision nutrition, but it's like, all right, don't jam a square peg into a round hole, or, meet the athlete halfway or find the biggest logjam, or, you know, some of the different quotes or, you know, morals that they have is, you know, if we could just keep on trying different techniques and find the one that stick with any given team or athlete, it really is going to pay off, you know, in the long run. So I've had many athletes where, all right, you know, they have really good buy-in right off the bat. They'll listen to exactly what I say in terms of sleep, in terms of nutrition or whatever. Those are the easier athletes. That kind of makes the job really, really easy. But then you have obviously the tough athletes. It just happens. Option one just doesn't work. You know, option two might not even work, but you just keep trying. And all right, option three works. All right, we're going to hone in on that. We're going to stick with that for an entire semester. And just to kind of expand even more on that, you know, one thing that I had a lot of time before the semester, you know, being that we were always on the road with basketball, and it's just a really good opportunity to kind of get work done and prepare for the next semester, to kind of sit down and just think about, all right, what's one theme for every single team that I have? And, you know, one theme across the board for multiple teams was just consistency. And you'd be surprised at how, you know, if you just tell one specific team, all right, I want you to pick one weakness, one thing you're bad at, and let's just do it every single time that you come in this weight room, and let's do it for the whole semester. Week one, it's really easy. Week two, it's really easy. Week three, week four, they start to forget about it. They don't want to do it. You know, and maybe it's just this generation, maybe it's kids nowadays, maybe it's athletes nowadays or whatever it is, but that consistency piece is not really drilled into them. So that was one thing that we worked a lot on this semester was just, hey, let's do the same thing. Let's get really, really good at it. When it's gets boring, let's still do it. When you're tired, let's still do it. When you don't feel like doing it, let's still do it. And that was probably one of the big pieces that we've been focusing on recently.
Yeah, that's sick. What were some of the things that some of the athletes gave you as far as feedback? Like some of the, you know, from across the board, like some of the teams that you were working with and some of the athletes, like what, like give an example of like what some of those things that they decided to like, all right, this is my weakness. I'm going to, because I would imagine you were probably not talking about, you know, maybe it was a specific exercise, but I would imagine a lot of it was built around just like overall personality, like, you know, traits, habits, just overall outlook, perception, you know, the way they're viewing and approaching, you know, probably maybe some things prior to the training session, whatever it was. Like, what were some of the ones that you came across, and what were some of the, like, talk to me a little bit about some of the athletes who gave you some trouble, right? Like the college athlete is a complex, you know, factor, right? So it's like, how do you kind of meet them halfway, like you said?
Yeah, I mean, you know, talking about specific exercises first, I'd probably say just hammering home some of the body weight exercises. So, hey, you're not very good at push-ups. Let's get really, really good at push-ups. Let's get really, really good at chin-ups. You know, maybe you can't get your first chin-up. All right, let's get our first chin-up. Some of the more intrinsic values, you know, maybe it's self-talk or something like that. You know, as soon as you walk in the weight room, you know, you're already doubting yourself, or you've seen your clean number for today and, you know, you just don't think you could do it or whatever. So it could be self-talk. Maybe it's talking to another teammate. So one thing that, you know, we definitely, that definitely emerged this past semester, and it's been massive for all of our teams, is just kind of thinking about Fordham strength and conditioning, either in your specific team or as a whole, as a tribe. So like, we are a tribe, we are a crew, everybody supports each other, everybody's here for each other. You know, and with that being said, just getting athletes to feed into one another, you know, while you're lifting. If you really think about, you know, you yourself on the sports field in the weight room or something like that, like when you have somebody else there, like, man, it's just so special, and you just do so much better when you have that support. I feel the same way in the weight room. I feel the same way with, you know, my coworkers, with the head strength coach here. I feel the same way with, you know, the jiu-jitsu gym and the martial arts that I do outside of here. But that was another one that kind of came up, was just talking to your teammates, feeding into your teammates, and kind of helping them through the lift. Whether they need it, whether they don't, whether they need it on specific days because, you know, family issues, social issues, you know, schoolwork, whatever it is, there's many different factors. And then I would just say about the hard to reach athletes, you know, some people just don't like to change, or are very resistant to it for, you know, whatever reason. But I really did learn a lot, and I learned a lot of really good approaches through precision nutrition, just, you know, different education and different tools on how to kind of break down barriers. And I really think I couldn't say it better than just meeting them halfway and finding, you know, precision nutrition calls it finding their superpowers, or finding out what they already do really well, or one thing that they already really like. And then, all right, how can we use that to develop really good habits, or to eat better, to sleep better, or something like that? Because it might be tough to find, but every athlete cares about something. Maybe the weight room is not their favorite place on campus, but they come to lift for a specific reason. You just got to find out exactly what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And to kind of go back to what you said before, but essentially what we're talking about is community, right? Like I think with anything, whether it be, strength training, jujitsu, just, being involved in any sort of hobby or lifestyle that you have, the stronger the community, the more likely you are to not only be successful, but the more likely you are to continue to go back, right? And the more times you go back, and obviously the more frequent you go, gives you obviously a better chance of being successful. You know what I mean? I think like interest level is probably the number one indicator as to whether someone's going to be successful in something, right? So even if someone's like main interest, like you said, like everyone's interested in something, everybody's got something that makes them tick. Say one of your athletes, they don't necessarily love going to the weight room and training or whatever, but if the community's strong and then they find some sort of like interest that they can latch onto within that particular training session or that particular cycle, or maybe latch on to something that you've provided them, obviously you as the coach provided them with something like that, chances of them being more successful are much more increased, obviously. So I definitely like that aspect of community for sure. What would you say are some of those things that you focus on when you are trying to talk with some of these athletes about nutrition? Like what are some of those big rocks that you go with, obviously, because I'm assuming you probably start somewhat simple, you know what I mean? Just kind of like getting them to understand the ideas and all that kind of stuff. Like what are some of those principles that you feel have been so effective with some of the athletes that you've actually had some positive influence on?
Yeah, I'd probably say a couple of different areas. The first one was just, getting to eat breakfast. A lot of athletes, especially we only have one weight room. So with that being said, we have a specific weight room schedule that goes from early in the morning to later in the afternoon. So you might be one of those athletes to have an early morning lift. You might have an early morning practice. You might have a later lift or something like that. And your days might not be as ideal as maybe you want them to be, or they might be different than when you go home for summer vacation or something like that. So eating breakfast is probably a big one. And like I said, that consistency piece. So I've started many group chats where we literally just send pictures of breakfast. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but right now it does not matter exactly what is composed in that breakfast. It just matters that you eat it. All right. When we get a little bit, better at that habit, when we get a little bit more consistent, all right, then we could start to fine tune what exactly you're eating. But let's start the habit first. And then the biggest one I would probably say is just putting together meals. So like, what is a healthy meal? What should a healthy meal have? What shouldn't a healthy meal have? How do you put it together? How do you put it together when, you're going out to eat and you might have, poor influences or,
that's a good one.
Yeah. How do you put it together in the dining hall? Maybe later on at night or earlier on in the morning when they don't have the best options at that specific time. How do you pick the better of the bad choices?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's one I didn't really think about, right? Because you're always kind of like talking about the training week when you're talking with an athlete, you're trying to guide them some sort, whether it be, nutritionally or whatever type of advice or wisdom you're trying to impart on the athlete. You're talking to them about the training week. And I think in a lot of cases, and understandably so, a lot of coaches will just kind of eliminate the weekend from the equation. They're just like, I don't have control. There's nothing I can do about that. And I understand it, but like you said, it's like almost like, all right, well, here's what we know is going to go down. So let's give you the realistic picture of how you should approach this. Like, basically choose the least of the worst options kind of thing. You know what I mean? To kind of get yourself out of a jam or whatever. And I think honestly, that's actually a great way to go about approaching it. Probably for anybody who's involved in just like, trying to better their nutritional habits and their lifestyle in general, right? It's like, hey, listen, like you're not going to be perfect all the time. And, I see you post a lot of stuff about nutrition and sleep habits. And I think I do believe and understand when you're saying that you have kind of, really bought into that as a sort of like a low hanging fruit, ways to have massive success just from like minimal change in your lifestyle. What would you say are some of the resources that you kind of go through? Obviously you mentioned precision nutrition, but what are some of the things that you would say have probably given you the most amount of information and kind of formulated formed the way that you view these things?
Yeah. I would definitely pick, three good ones. And I think, I'm very hesitant to get really specific when it comes to nutrition. I like to, like you said, pick the low hanging fruit or just handle the big rocks. And, I'm very hesitant, like I said, to get, all right, I'm really big on keto. I'm really big on this, that, the other. So the three that I would pick, like I said, precision nutrition. I just think that they do a really good job of taking nutrition, which is really complex and can go a lot of different ways. And they just make it really, really simple, really, really easy to kind of meet people halfway, regardless of where they're specifically at. or maybe how bad they are, how deep they dug themselves in a hole. So precision nutrition would be the first one. Stand efforting would be the second one, and the vertical diet. That's just something I found a lot of success with, whether it be gaining weight or improving body composition. I found a lot of success using that kind of framework, because it is a framework and not really a specific, hey, you must eat this, you must eat that. It kind of gives you different options. And I would just say sort of a name that's kind of new to the scene, but Dr. James D. Nickel Antonio would be a massive one. Who just gives you really, really, really good advice. A lot of really good advice for athletes, a lot of really good advice for just improving performance overall.
Yeah. I think that, what was the name of the last guy that you mentioned? Because he is new, you're right. And I think I've seen him pop up a couple of times. What was his name?
So James D. Nickel Antonio, he wrote the book, The Salt Fix. I might be saying his name wrong, by the way, but he wrote the book, The Salt Fix. He's got the Immunity Fix. I think he has the Mineral Fix. And then he just came out with, and there was a bunch of co-authors, but the book called Win, which just kind of goes into like everything in terms of athletic performance, whether that be nutrition, whether it be, recovery, sleep, things like that. And it's a really, really good book. But the best part about him is he puts out daily Instagram posts that take 10 seconds to read. Very, very simple, really, really good information. And much like what we're trying to teach in terms of strength conditioning, it's just similar themes over and over and over again. And it's just really good information.
Yeah, that was the one thing I noticed about a lot of the stuff that you I think it was either you or so. I think he's probably been reposted by a few different guys that I follow, but I think it was always like, wow, that's very, short, quick, snippets, right? Like very applicable information that can kind of be touched on and move in a certain direction and be applied right away. And I think obviously given the space that we work in, that's not to say that I don't love the short-term approach. I don't love band-aids, you know what I mean? But they are necessary at certain times, depending on what it is that you're doing. And I think when it comes to athletes and dealing with nutrition, band-aids can obviously turn into solutions at some point, you know what I mean, as long as you're establishing some of those foundations, like you said. So I do like that short, quick, applicable stuff. I think that definitely makes a difference. When it comes to, moving from that, obviously some of the other places that you've decided to kind of further and advance your knowledge base, right? Like what are some of the references and some of the places that you seek out information when it comes to not just nutrition, but really anything, you know what I mean? What are some of the things that you feel, and it could be podcasts, could be books, could be lectures, whatever the case may be. It could be professors, but honestly, it could be, I'm coming to learn this more and more, especially as I ask this question across the board of some of these podcasts. Like, it could be anybody. Like it could be somebody who's not even involved in strength and conditioning, right? Like it could be, and it could be a person, like I should have, prefaced with saying that. So what are some of the things that you feel like have shaped you the most as far as your views on things?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that I want to be, almost a one-stop shop. So I always want to have, either good answers or be able to refer somebody to someone who has all the answers or some good answers in any particular topic, whether that be mindset, whether that be nutrition, whether it be recovery or just strength and conditioning. So kind of with that being said, I try and have like a multifaceted approach and just kind of hit every single corner through podcasts, through reading, through, whatever it is. So I'd say a bunch of different avenues. When it comes to lifting, I was actually lucky enough. So myself and the head strength coach here, Coach Gilfetter, who is just so eager to always learn, always get better, always, kind of, sorry about that.
You're good.
Question some of the things that we've done previously and just kind of just figure, a lot of testosterone I hear. Just, always figure out and think about ways we could always improve or things that we could do better. We actually, in the past year, we did 2 Olympic weightlifting seminars, one with Dmitry Klokov, and we learned a lot about the Russian system and their side of weightlifting. And then we just took another one from Coach Ma in New York City, who is a Chinese weightlifting coach. We learned about their system. So 2 extremely dominant systems of Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Opposing approaches too. So we definitely got a lot of good hands-on experience. That would be, the lifting side of things. And that just gave us a lot, that just made the wheels turn and just gave us a lot of things to read about in the future and think about in the future and ways to program. In terms of nutrition, definitely James D. Nickel Antonio. See, I can't even say it. Yeah. He's killing it nowadays in terms of nutrition. In terms of just general knowledge, some podcasts I like to, subscribe to would probably be, Bigger, Faster, Stronger with Mark Bell. That's probably the main one I'd like to say, but that just kind of hits a bunch of different topics. I love how they talk about really good things, but they're also, kind of quick to be funny sometimes, and they bring humor and they bring fun into the podcast, which I really do enjoy. When you're listening to it early on in the morning or late at night, it can be quite enjoyable when it's not just kind of dry information.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's probably a big podcast that I've been listening to lately. And then in terms of books, I'd probably say a lot of the things I've been reading nowadays are focused on mindset, whether that be Jocko, whether that be David Goggins, Cameron Haynes, people like that. On the jiu-jitsu side, there's actually a lot that you can learn about in terms of mindset, in terms of, the Kaizen mentality, Bushido approach, or just getting 1% better, whatever it is. So one big book that I read recently that was just massive in terms of mindset would be Hickson Gracie's book, which is called Breathe. But that kind of covers all the bases for the most part.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. I think it's funny because I feel like that the goal of the podcast, and maybe, some, emphasize this more than others, but obviously give like a wholehearted kind of holistic viewpoint of the human being that I'm obviously interviewing, or whatever you want to call this, just conversation in general. I think you get that a little bit from obviously all of the resources that you just mentioned, whether it be books, podcasts, people, whatever the case may be. But kind of going into that now, I would like to touch on, obviously give people some insight. Like obviously, you're a coach, obviously you're a son, you're a friend, you're an assistant to, Gilfed or whatever the case may be. Right. And you're providing insight constantly, and you're trying to be all these different people, but there is that BJJ side of things, and jiu-jitsu, I think, is super important. So talk to us a little bit about like what you achieved. Obviously you had a promotion this weekend in the tournament that you competed in. And then just kind of talk a little bit about what you think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu provides in terms of some of the guys you mentioned, whether it be Jocko or some of the other guys. I think Jocko is great. Like I just finished Extreme Ownership. I think that it's just all like general, like great information, like, dichotomy leadership, whatever the case may be. His podcast is just, great. It's rife with information and books, obviously on, whether it be about face or, battle leadership and things like that. Like I've read so many war books that I've never even heard of before, just based off of the podcast alone. But there's a connectivity between the things that Jocko is preaching, the things that, we talk about, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, staying calm in moments of extreme stress and acute stress and duress and whatever the case may be. So talk to us a little bit about that stuff and kind of how it intertwines with like your personality, maybe a little bit more of like how your temperament has changed over the years, right? Like it's like everyone wants to talk Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We could talk all you want about like technical aspects and competing and belts and all that kind of stuff, but really at the face of it, right? I in my short time, training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I really think the value is staying calm in times of immediate panic, right? So being able to obviously stay calm, make decisions. So talk to me a little bit about that, your process, like where this whole thing started and how it got, to where it is now for you.
Yeah. You know what? Probably
it's a heavy question. I know it's like loaded,
you know what I mean?
But I figured, like I got like, I don't know. I don't want to keep you forever, but I do think it is something important to touch on. You know what I mean? So just give us like whatever your thoughts are. Like they don't even have to be filtered. You know what I mean? Just like whatever. But I do think it's important to kind of touch on that stuff, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll first say like I'm really really lucky to have a really good and supportive staff. So obviously, Coach Gill, is the head strength coach here, is my boss, but will never refer to himself as so. We'll always say we're all equals. We're all head strength coaches of our own respective teams. And definitely treats us all as that, which is absolutely amazing. And just to have the entire staff, but especially him, being really, really supportive over just doing something outside, like something to, in his exact words, but something to fill your bucket, because you'll be a better coach. You'll be more excited to come to work if you have something to kind of, whether it be take the stress out or just something to, look forward to or something like that. Maybe you have, a bad day, because obviously these kids, they might not know it, but they can really make or they can really ruin your day. And, they really can shape, what kind of day you're going to have. And, it might just be an hour for them, but it's your entire day. And you could also look at it the other way, right? It's your entire day, but it's their 60 minutes. And, we really got to make it as special as possible. But there are plenty of days where it's like, all right, I need a little stress relief right now. Or listen, I'm really, really happy. I'm having an absolutely amazing day. Like, let's just cap it off at the end of the day. But just good to have something to look forward to, a community outside of, just work. I don't know if I ever want to be that kind of person where it's like, all right, I wake up, I go to work, I come home, and that's it. I want to have just something outside of work, for whatever it is. And I think it could be another weight room, it could be another gym or whatever. And for right now, it just happens to be Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I started it, I had a lot of support from the entire staff, but especially Coach Gill, and he actually comes to the same gym and does Muay Thai at the same gym. So having that is absolutely awesome. And there's some times where I'm coming straight from work and he's just leaving. We kind of tag each other out type thing. So having that support system behind me is great, and just having people where, all right, if I have a competition coming up or something like that, hey, what do you need from me? Like, do you need any help? Do you need me to, cover a team or something like that? And, obviously the answer is for the most part always going to be no, but just having the question, the request there is absolutely awesome. And it's great to know that, all right, I have my athletes behind me, got my family behind me, I got my friends behind me, and then also having the staff behind me is absolutely awesome. And just gives you extra power and extra strength. But so it definitely started like that. Just, Coach Gill always saying, hey, do something outside of here to fill your bucket, have something outside of here for when times get tough or whatever it is. So I found Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I fell in love with it just before I even did it, just based on the art aspect and the movement aspect. I mean, if you see a video of or watch in person, two guys rolling who know what they're doing, like, it just looks pretty. It just looks amazing. And it's such a, action reaction, such a flow type. It's awesome. So I started with, just YouTube videos of, the Gracies, or I think it's, Renner Gracie or Henner Gracie, just breaking down fights and talking about different positions. And that's basically where it started. And then I just pulled the trigger. One day I told my brother, all right, listen, we're going to sign up. We're going to sign up this month. There's no, I'm thinking about doing it. No, we're going to do it. So we signed up. I'll never forget my first day. I show up. They, first couple days, they kind of give you the choice. Hey, you don't have to go live. If you want to, you can. So we go live. I get knocked in the nose with an elbow. I start gushing blood all over the place. I look at one of the coaches without even saying anything, but as almost to say, should I keep going? Should I, go wash myself off or whatever? And I'll never forget, this is, Coach Jimmy Scarecrow, who's still my coach to this day, just looks at me. He's like, listen, we roll hard here and we're going to keep going. And so we just kept going, and it is what it is. But from, that day, from that week on, just caught the bug. I keep on telling all these athletes who say, oh, when are you going to get your black belt or whatever? They don't really understand the whole process of it. But I keep telling them, hey, like, I am a year or a little over a year into a 20-year journey. And I really want to see this whole thing through. Obviously in the future, things might get in the way, but I really do want to see this whole thing through. And then in terms of just, what I've learned, it's so hard to pick, one thing or two things. I could say 2 million things, but you said it really good, staying calm under pressure. I would just say being calm in general. I think, what I brought back to strength conditioning, or one of the things that I brought back to strength conditioning, is like, when you first get into the field, you want to be, that aggressive coach who's everybody respects. And, you got to listen to every word that I say, and I'm going to be demanding, and, I might, curse at you, and I'm going to be mean or whatever it is. And you got to respect me and listen to what I say. And then, kind of as I learned throughout the years, and then really learned throughout jiu-jitsu, is like, all right, I should be a lot more calm as a coach, because I never know what's going on in this kid's life or their day or whatever. Like, I have no idea. And rather than yelling at them, let's just have a conversation. And then based on that conversation, we could figure it out. And, do I still get angry at times? Sure. But I've learned to be a lot more calm in many situations, because I've been through very, very stressful situations, and I've been through really, really tough times and really, really tough roles. And I've just learned the more calm you are, the better things will go. And, kind of Jocko says it best. And he makes the analogy where it's like, all right, you're getting smothered by that purple belt or that brown belt or whatever it is. If you freak out, it's probably not going to go too well. If you relax, think for a second, decide what to do, where to go, you'll probably get out of that situation, or you'll be a little bit better off. But if you control your breathing, regardless if you're in a really, really bad position, you're probably better off at getting out of that position, or maybe just lasting a little bit longer. So you said it best. That was probably a big one. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one, I'd say.
Yeah. And I'll let, just to, not to cut you off, I do want to make sure that we emphasize what you outlined is that 10 to 20 year journey, right? Like, and I think that that's something that a lot of people would steer away from, right? But you made the decision, and it's funny because that was actually my the same process that I had when it became, I was like, I always wanted to get into whatever, but I was like, I work in college football. I was like, I know what would be required in terms of dedication. And I know that I wouldn't be able to give that to, BJJ. So as soon as I stopped working in college football, I was like, okay, no more excuses. Like you need to call around right now. And then the first person to call you back and go in there tonight. So I think what's interesting is that, like, number one, I think anybody listening to this podcast and any one of your athletes could take that particular, approach to everything they do. It's like, hey, listen, you've been talking about doing something for so long, just need to just do it now. Like you're either doing it or you're not, right? So like you made the decision, and a lot of people wouldn't do that. That's a very difficult thing to do, especially to step into a very intimidating atmosphere and be vulnerable in the sense that, like, obviously you're going to be rolling around with dudes who are probably half your size and nowhere near as strong as you are, but they're going to make you look like you're 125 pounds, right? So at least in those first couple of stages. And I think the fact that you were interested in something that was going to be a 10 to 20 year commitment, right? Like that takes discipline, it takes time, it takes patience, right? And I think it takes a special type of being to actually want to commit to something of that nature. So I do think that that's really, number one, that's really important to note. And I want to make sure that the listeners are obviously aware of that. Like that's a quality that's not a quality that jiu-jitsu brought out of you. That's just who you are, Steve. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like kind of like inherently who you are. And then obviously you were able to pursue jiu-jitsu because of that. And then I think the other thing, obviously, like you said, staying calm and, like there's like some like 250 pound like purple belts who are just like, they love just putting their weight all on your throat. Right. So like, being able to obviously control yourself in those moments. So is there anything else you can think of that you can, I mean, obviously like this weekend was obviously big for you, right? So like, what ended up taking place this weekend? Obviously, this was have you been doing this for like a year now or over a year? Or I forget what you told me, but yeah, talk to me a little bit about like what this. Okay.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand on what you were saying, it's just taught me so much, and I hope that they see it, and I'm always preaching that. Like I said, like you said it best. I'm 1 year into a 20-year journey, and I'm not even thinking about the 20 years. I'm not even thinking about the 1 year. I'm just thinking about the next training session. That's all I'm thinking about. And I always tell them, like, regardless of what we're doing, maybe we're doing like a 30 on, 30 off circuit. Like, you're just thinking about the next 30 seconds. That's it. And I always want to be the person that kind of shows them the way, shows them how to do the things. Like I want to practice exactly what I preach. I don't want to just say the things, and I want to make sure that they know, all right, if I'm telling you to do something, I guarantee you I've done it. Like I'm showing you that I'm doing it right now. And I really do hope that all my athletes do know that. But and then just to expand on our last question, another thing that I probably learned was just being humbled. You know what I mean? And I think at first, like, and I hope I never had this. I probably did it at a certain point, but you're going to get tapped out a lot. You're going to get smothered. Like just be humble enough to come back a little bit better. Like you're going to tap, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Like, don't be one of those white belts. It's like, all right, I'm never going to tap, or I'm going to hold down the position. And I know that, maybe certain things I could kind of muscle my way out of, but that's not the right way to do things. I'm going to do it the right way, and not just the, use my strength, and not just the easy way type thing. So that's probably another big thing I learned. And then reading Hickson's book talks a lot about, the samurai mindset and how to approach different situations and how to really, hone in on that humbleness. So, if it's a competition, right, and I lose, I'm not going to sink my head. Okay. I'm just going to act like as if I won. Okay. Not a big deal. All right. There'll be another match. There'll be another role. We'll figure it out. If I do win, I'm never going to celebrate. This is, definitely a big mistake that I might have made at first. If I tap somebody out, if I beat somebody, if I was in a competition and I beat somebody, I might be really, really happy, but not the way to be, right? Just stand up. So, the person raised your hand, you'd be happy on the inside. You're just stone cold, walk off the mats, bow, good to go. So that was another big thing that I learned is, kind of don't make your lows too low, don't make your highs too high, and just stay as consistent, and in the middle as possible. But we had a good weekend, and I don't want to talk about myself too much, but I definitely had a really, really good weekend. I made myself better as a person, as a coach, as a friend, as a coworker, as a family member, whatever it is. But man, I love competing because like I said, this goes back to that practice what you preach type thing. Like it just puts you in so many situations where you can relate to these athletes, and then, use it as a teaching point later on. So just this past weekend, there was 20 opportunities where I could have quit. There was 20 opportunities where I was really, really tired, 20 opportunities where I could not breathe, but I just kept going through. And I think about all these things. I think about every single athlete that I might have, thinking about me or depending on me or cheering me on or something like that. I think about the coworkers. I think about my family, and that alone is, it's just, you don't have any options, right? You can't quit. You don't have the option to do so. So competed this past weekend. I had a little trouble with the weight cut, but I wound up getting a bronze medal, which I was pretty happy about.
Nice.
And then the next day, wound up getting my blue belt. And, it's just, like I said, another teaching point.
Yeah.
Because
Congrats,
the best
man.
way to say it is that a black belt is literally a blue belt or white belt, whatever you want to say, that just never quit. And I do not plan on quitting, at least in the near future.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I don't think that there's a ton of value in me trying to dive any deeper on any of the things or elaborate on any of the things that you obviously touched on. And that's why I wanted you to talk about it, because like I said, we're talking about jiu-jitsu, but what you're really talking about is you're demonstrating who you are as a person and your personality, right? How you approach things, your mindset, and all those things. So I hope that regardless of whether somebody listening to this has any experience in Brazilian jiu-jitsu or any other endeavor, that they're taking some of these concepts and these principles and applying it to whatever they are involved in, right? Whether it be coaching or business, philosophy, whatever the case may be. So, I think we're coming up on about an hour. So, and I know you got some other things going on in your life, so I want to let you go, but I do appreciate you doing this. Any final thoughts or anything you kind of want to say to, obviously, give a chance to anything that any content that you have out there, your Instagram, your social media, whatever it is. Anything else? I mean, if you wanted to plug the actual facility that you're training at for BJJ, all those things, you know what I mean? Like any opportunity, anything else you want to kind of leave with the audience now, we'll wrap up from there.
Not too much. I would just say, follow us on Instagram. So we have Ram Strength, which will show all of our teams across the board. Me on Instagram, I think I'm just Steve Georgio, or I think my actual name is Georgio spelled with a 1 instead of the I. And I'm just, highlighting the great things that these athletes do day in and day out. And we do the same thing on Ram Strength. We're just trying to do the best we can. But listen, I mean, I think the biggest things that we touched on is practice what you preach and just keep your bucket full. I mean, I found it through jiu-jitsu. Many people can find it through different things. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but joining some type of, martial art discipline was one of the best things I ever did. Changed my life. And, we talked about it, the best way possible, but it's just one small step in a massive, massive journey. And I just hope to see it through.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I appreciate it, Steve, man. This is awesome. I had no doubts that it would be awesome. I really appreciate you coming on and giving us some of the thoughts that you have. And it's kind of crazy. Obviously, I think we met back in 2017, right? It was the first time we met was at Quinnipiac when you came through to see B and whatnot. So, and Jamie as well. So, yeah, man, it's been awesome to kind of see that the transition that you've made, obviously. So, really pumped, man. Thanks again for coming on.